Okay, grade 8. This is section 6.3 on multiplying proper fractions by proper fractions. We have a couple of warm-up questions on the show you know. It says determine each product using diagrams. So when we use diagrams for these questions for A, I'll write it out here. The question says a half times a half. Now the first thing I want you to be aware of is how to read that. And what we're going to do is we're going to always read the multiplication symbol as the word of. So I want you to read this as half of half. So the first thing I'm going to assess is, can you interpret it in terms of English and understand that that's what the sentence says? And once you have that, the second expectation is you'll be able to draw it. So if I'm going to draw half of half, I'm going to start with a picture of half of something, half of a chocolate bar. And I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to cut that half in half. And this check mark represents half of the half. Okay? That check mark represents half of the half. And how much is that? Well, the denominator before I made my cut was 2, and after I made my cut was 4. How many parts of chocolate can I eat of those 4 parts? 1. So if I'm given 1 part or half of half, I would actually be given a quarter of something. And if you want to double check your answer, we said the easiest way to double check your answer for multiplication is to simply multiply your numerators and multiply your denominators. And 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 2 is 4. So we have our answer is confirmed that the answer is a quarter. So the expectation will be, you can write it in a sentence, you can draw it with a picture, and you could use a basic method for solving the answer to the product of two fractions. Our second question says a third times 3/4, or if I write it in words, it would be a third of 3/4. This is for B, a third of 3/4. So if I say a third of 3/4, the first picture I'm going to make is 3/4. I'm going to cut it into quarters, and I'm going to shade in 3/4 of that. So that is 3/4. Now I don't get to keep, according to the sentence, I don't get to keep all 3/4. I only get to keep a third of the 3/4. So I'm going to cut this into thirds. Okay? So this would be a third, this would be a third, this would be a third of the 3/4. So I'm going to use one check mark to represent 1/3 of the 3/4. Now before I cut that, the denominator was 4. After I made my cuts, my denominator made 12, became 12. And if we're thinking about chocolate, how many pieces of chocolate do I get to eat if I kept a third of 3/4 of a chocolate bar? The answer would be 3/12. Now 3/12 is not in lowest term because both are divisible by 3. So the answer would be, in lowest terms, a quarter. So 3/4, a third of 3/4 makes sense. That is a quarter. In our second show, we get into slightly more complicated ones. I'm foregoing the estimation right now. I don't particularly care for the way we estimate fraction multiplication, but we'll just do it straight up as a modeling, interpreting modeling, and using an algorithm. So for A, the first thing I want you to write is 3/5 of 2/9. If I wanted to show what 3/5 of 2/9 is, I would first start off with 2/9. So I'm going to cut this into 9 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines make 9 parts. 2 shaded in. That represents 2/9. And I'm not going to keep 1/5. I'm not going to keep 2/5. I'm going to keep 3/5. So I'm going to cut it into 5 parts. 4 lines stuff make 5 parts. And this here is a 1/5 of the 2/9. This here would be 2/5 of the 2/9. And this here would be 3/5 of the 2/9. So I'm going to use 3 check marks to represent 3/5 of the 2/9. Now before I made my cuts, my denominator was 9. After I made my cuts, my denominator became 45. There are 45 parts here. And of those 45 parts of chocolate, I get to keep 6/45, which is your answer, not in lowest terms because both are divisible by 3. And my lowest term answer would be 2/15. If I double check my work using a basic algorithm, 3/5 times 2/9, multiply your numerators, multiply your denominators, and you would get this, which you would then get this. And finally, your last one, B, 5/6 of 4/5. So I'm going to start with 4/5. 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5. Red fish, blue fish, green fish, blue fish. We have 4/5. And I'm going to keep 5/6 of that. So I'm going to cut it in half. 2 lines there. 2 lines there. Make 6 parts. 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/5 right there. So that's the 4/5. So before we made the cut, our denominator was 5. After we made the cuts, my denominator became 30. There's 30 parts there. And if I keep 5/6. I gotta, sorry, my bad. That's 5/6 of 4/5. If I keep 5/6, I get to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 19, 20 parts of the 30 in total, which in lowest terms mean I get to have 2/3.